Well, joined now by Mr. Jerry Chukwueke to get his thoughts on this entire scenario. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Well, thank you, Chamberlain. Good morning, everybody.
I know you watched all of this and keeping tabs on what's going on. Many outrightly would ask you, is this the change that the APC promised?
Well, for me, I think the challenge has quite a bit to do with the nomination process itself. I think what's important is, yes, the issue of corruption and anti-corruption, but also the perception of it is just as important. So when you now get into the Senate rules and the business of what the court rules or should rule, or who therefore ought to be cleared, I think these are issues that should have been anticipated going in, because it's important. And I think what Nigerians are talking about in the change business is really the reality of anti-corruption and the perception of it. But having said that, these are the president's men. The president nominated these gentlemen and women, and the buck stops with him. The issue of the responsibility of the performance of this cabinet is Mr. President's track record.
What do you think of the impression people have, having looked through this? I mean, the senators are all on the same page when they say, look, the Senate has a right to clear whoever they want. They have a right to reject any report that they want. And many of even the PDP senators who spoke to us, not against the Senate clearing anybody. Even his party insisted nobody should be cleared. But processes, he says, are important. The impression that people have is, if there's a matter before the court, as the ministerial nominee and his counsel did admit that much to Senate's Ethics Committee, on what grounds then did the same Senate say, well, no, we will go ahead and clear him, having been in receipt of those documents or been served of notices of these cases in court?
Well, it's clearly partisan politics. And I think with all due respect, with regards to former Governor Mechi's case, what I thought that made his case quite peculiar was the very public celebration after the APC won the presidency, that and this was by APC, many members of APC and strong leadership in public fora congratulated him, thanked him openly for funding some APC governors, and the party, in addition to the role that he played as the Director General. Well, he probably was a very wealthy man before he became governor. But when you start to do those sort of things, you set yourself up for these situations that we're dealing with today. But I want to move the argument to the business of the people, because the divide in the Senate now is further worsening the signals about stability, about economic development, the work of government, and the business that we must do for Nigerian people.
Do you agree with the...
And it's hurting it.
Sorry, Chamberlain. I mean, that was why I asked Senator Omobachi if this wouldn't or hasn't caused a kind of rift between the PDP senators who had a cordial relationship with the leadership of the Senate. Because if they feel badly about this, and in his words, he sees it as a kind of impunity, that you can't be saying A and be doing something quite differently. Don't you think this ultimately will affect the common man rather than face the real business, the core business of lawmaking that will ultimately better the lives of Nigerians? There will be some kind of bickerings on matters of economics.
Absolutely, absolutely right. Because look, Nigerian people don't care so much about this dangerous divide that is brewing in the Senate. The change Nigerians are talking about is the business of infrastructure, power, jobs, the economy. And these are issues right now that are in dire stress.
Are you seeing that already?
Yeah, it's obvious. I mean, just go out there now and get a feel for what's happening in the marketplace. Huge layoffs. The power situation is stumbling again. We have very strict foreign exchange challenges now that has seriously impaired business. The confidence of the international community is waning. Look, the issues are real. And that's what Nigerians want to talk about. That's the focus. That's the change we're talking about. And quite frankly, you get a feel, and when you listen carefully to social media, that part of what's created even more of this excitement now is that many Nigerians were expecting some fresh blood, new ideas people with excitement and inspirational people that will come into the cabinet and help put together this change that is so desired. And with the exception of a few, it appeared to be more of people that had been around, recycled a bit. So the question was, why did it take 6 months to put them together? And so it just gets all muddled up a bit. But I think what's important is that we focus on where we must go. And that is that Mr. President ultimately has responsibility for this. It is his team. He has his team now. Let's get on with the business of our people.
Do you subscribe to the views of those who say, because it was a couple of days ago, civil society groups had that meeting and they had to say some home truths that look, it's not looking good. So many just think that at the moment, the president's not living up to expectations, especially with regards to the economy.
Well, now we have a team. Now we must be hopeful. And I think Mr. President will now get on with it. He has to do so because the numbers and the challenges are piling up. I'll give you an example. We're talking about the power of the private sector in Nigeria. But when you look at it quite closely, it's a private sector that is fairly weak because even the banking subsector is nowhere near as strong. Just look at the impact of Treasurer's single account and what it's done to banks.
Well, is that a good impact or not?
Well, obviously, from a viewpoint of liquidity, it's an issue. So if they're not able to do lending and they're not able to support the private sector would have loads of difficulties. How do you do medium and long-term investments other than, trade or trading activities that turn over things in 30, 40, and 60 days? That's not how you grow an economy.
The worry is, how did we get here? 5 months is too long a time for us not to have a cabinet in place, given everyone would agree. But if you look at it, one would have thought that the civil service that should have been the engine room, we still have them in place. We have some permanent secretaries. How come we still haven't been able to see a drive in that direction to fixing the economy? Talking about the private sector, talking about the small businesses that are folding up.
Well, quite frankly, when you have crude oil selling at $47 a barrel, it's more than halved. What that's telling us, bearing in mind that is some 85% or better of your foreign revenue earnings, it's a huge issue. The impact is enormous. We now have a situation, and all you have to do is look at the allocations to states and local governments. Look what's happening with FAC. If the revenue is not coming in from crude oil sales because the price is more than halved and you're a one-dimensional economy, that's a big deal, and that's not a good deal.
So you're not very confident then that, the president's cabinet can do what they need to do to turn the economy around?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they got their work cut out for them. Because now is the time. This is the time. We now must walk the talk.
The reason I asked that is because you also talked about some of the people on the cabinet. I think your words were something to the effect that you were hoping to see bright new minds, but you assume that what you've seen are people whom you've seen before.
Well, what I was saying was...
With a very tiny exception, so I was just wondering if that's...
Yeah, the perception many Nigerians, and you just look at the social media, was they were expecting some fresh ideas, fresh blood, new approach to things, people. That was the point I was making.
Okay.
And what they saw were essentially people they thought largely were recycled. That was the point.
So it is really unjustifiable that it took this long to get those people?
I think that's the point a lot of Nigerians are making. But my point is that these are the president's men. He chose them. I made the point about perception and reality, and these ought to have been anticipated going in.